Welcome to Her Fantasy Football. You can hear us on Blog Talk Radio / Her Fantasy Football and on iTunes. Make sure to subscribe to us on herfantasyfootball.com so you can get our waivers and injury newsletters. Also, don't forget to look up our rankings before you set your Week 12 lineups. And a friendly reminder, make sure to tune in to our radio show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio from 9 to 11 Eastern on Saturday night. You can chat with us on Twitter at Her Fantasy FB and on Facebook / Her Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Courtney Kirby. I'm here with my lovely sisters, Brandon, Marianne Lee, Ashley Williams. Cheers. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah. Already drinking beer. It's 9 o'clock here. So I was going to say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but it's later than that.
It's later than that.
People are probably cooking. You can just slip us in your little ears while you're cleaning your house before guests come over, or relaxing because you're going somewhere else.
Although probably everyone that listens to us is not even going to remotely check in for another 4 to 5 hours for when we usually start recording.
This is true. It is a very odd time for us.
Sorry, guys.
It is a very odd time. 7:30 Mountain here, 9:30 Eastern. I don't think we've ever recorded this early.
Nope.
But we did it for you because there are 3 games on Thursday instead of the 1 Thursday night game. So we want to make sure we recorded this and posted it so you can listen to the first, at least part of the podcast, which we will do it in order from the Thursday night game. So we will do the morning game first, then the afternoon game, then the night game, so you can get what you need to get before setting your initial lineups. And we'll try to cut it in by an hour and a half, so you can hopefully listen to the whole thing before setting any of your lineups. So let's dive right into it. No one's on bye because it's real time now. Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions. Oh, Ashley, the Vikings.
Yes. So Adam Thielen is I'm going to start off with because he's my favorite player on this team, and he's so good. He has emerged as the most consistent receiver on this team. I don't think that's even a question at this point. So he caught 6 of 9 targets for 123 yards and a touchdown last week. He has had 4 solid weeks in a row and has a decent matchup this week. So you can play him as you usually do in your starting lineup. Now, Stephon Diggs, I'm not as excited about this week. He did not have a great week last week, catching 4 of 6 for 32, but he should bounce back. But I'm still going to slide him into what I would consider a wide receiver 2 role. I don't feel good about him as a wide receiver 1. I just think that Thielen and Case Keenum have really great chemistry, and I think Diggs will still do okay. He still is worthy of a starting lineup, but I don't think he's the wide receiver 1 on this team at this point in time. Kyle Rudolph, if you need at least 4 points, he is your guy. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 58 yards in last week's game, and he's been targeted 7 times and caught at least 5 of them in the past 6 games. So while he's not getting huge numbers, he's very consistent, which is a rarity for a tight end. So for the most part, you should be thrilled with 5 catches from a tight end, and that's what he's going to get you. And then another starter here is based on patterns for running backs. It should have been Jerick McKinnon who was the guy, but it was Latavius Murray who stole the show. He rushed 15 times for 95 yards and had 2 touchdowns. He is the goal line back, and he has scored 3 touchdowns in the past 2 games combined. He has a nice matchup, so expect another week of at least 1 touchdown from Latavius Murray. What I will say is Jerick McKinnon is a sleeper for me. He has been bumped out of my starters because despite only getting 48 yards last week, he is getting the touches, so he can be a sleeper. The volume, is there week in, week out. He rushed 14 times last week, and he's had no less than 10 rush attempts the past 6 games. And he gets the nod for pass attempts, so he's still a viable option for PPR, but Latavius Murray is certainly who they're going to when they need somebody towards a goal line. Bench, Case Keenum. But what I will say is he completed 27 of 38 passes for 280 yards and a touchdown in what was a surprising beatdown of the Rams. I did not expect that at all. I don't know about you guys. No. But after 2 solid weeks, Coach Zimmer has had no choice but to continue with Case Keenum, who he has confirmed will get the start this week. And I would say that he's a viable streaming option. He's been doing well the last few weeks, but I just don't know if I trust this organization that if he throws an interception that we're not going to see Teddy Bridgewater immediately put it in there. I think similar to what happened with Tyrod Taylor, they're waiting their time for Case Keenum to slip up just slightly so they can put Teddy Bridgewater in. And so therefore for me, I can't confidently say stream him because I think he could get pulled at any moment.
Awesome. All right. Well, this might be a really tough week for the Lions, as we were just saying. We also with Minnesota Vikings did to the Rams. It was not nice. It was not nice. So I'm trying to go with anyone other than Matthew Stafford this week, I will say. I don't think he'll be awful. I'm guessing he'll have around 14 fantasy points, so it's not like the worst. I don't think he's going to do as bad as Goff did last week, but I don't think he's going to do enough to help you with your fantasy team either. As for Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, and Amir Abdullah, I like them all for a flex, but they scare me just as much. Only one wide receiver has had double digits points in standard leagues in the last 4 games. So listen, they see the targets. I don't mind them, especially in PPR, but it's going to be a little bit dicey. So they're not an automatic start. Amir Abdullah will get somewhere around 9 fantasy points, which is what he's good at. And I think he's not going to be held to any less than that per se against Minnesota, because I don't think that they find him as the threat. The only real quarterback who's done well against Minnesota was Kirk Cousins, and that's because he ran in for 2 touchdowns. I don't see Matthew Stafford doing that. So they're just all not my favorite play this week against Minnesota. I wish I would have taken a step back last week with the Rams. This week I definitely am with the Lions. But you can start Matt Prater. That's a plus. And as we mentioned, Adam Thielen plays for the Minnesota Vikings, so you are not starting Detroit's defense. All right, we have the Los Angeles Chargers, the Dallas Cowboys at 2:30 Eastern on Thursday. Brandon, those Chargers.
It's actually at 2:30 Mountain, 4:30 Eastern.
Oh, sorry.
The day starts
Eastern.
At 12:30 Eastern.
My fault.
This is a nice reminder that we have a time difference here at Her Fantasy Football.
Yes.
I am sadly on the East Coast, but they are in Mountain Time, and it's earlier for them. It's nice. All right, so the Los Angeles Chargers. Well, they were the beneficiaries of Sean McDermott taking crazy pills and deciding to start Nathan Peterman. I just you guys. So
talk about unexpected beatdown. Whoa.
Well,
Amazing.
Expected and unexpected. So I was on the Fantasy Pros podcast last week with Mike Tagliere and Bobby. I can't remember who was listening. I just met him on a podcast without seeing him, but nice guys, Fantasy Pros, right? And we were supposed to make bold predictions. And my bold prediction was that Tyrod Taylor would score more points than Nathan Peterman. I didn't know how many more points. I just thought he would get benched. I thought this was a horrible way to introduce poor Nathan Peterman on the road against one of the best defenses in the league. It didn't make any sense, especially when it comes to the pass rush, why they would do that to him. But this was epic. And the real thing is, here's what's shocking, you guys. Phillip Rivers still didn't score that many fantasy points, actually. He did have 2 touchdowns. He put up 18 points. But you would think with that score that it was like this epic beatdown. The problem is they're not going to play the Bills again this week, is what I'm trying to tell you. This is my long way of saying that the Cowboys are not the Bills, even though Dak Prescott tried to be Nathan Peterman as hard as he possibly could last week. Wow. I don't think that's going to happen again. They also might get back their left tackle, which is part of the big problem here. Ash is going to go into the Cowboys. But my point is to expect those kind of numbers and that kind of productivity going into this week would be a little bit of a folly. And so I'm going to say this. Melvin Gordon looked back to normal last week. Starting him per usual against Dallas. They give up the 11th most points to opposing running backs. Great. And I think you can't really bench Keenan Allen after he finally scored a touchdown for the first time since week 1 and actually scored 2 and put up 159 receiving yards. It was a crazy good game for him. Dallas does give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I'm okay hoping that it's a hot streak, but I'm also not expecting anything close to that. So, take that as you will. I'm also going to say this, that I'm okay with Phillip Rivers as a flyer. Again, this league is crazy right now with who's playing quarterback, so I'm not against that. But, Carson Wentz went over 20 points last week, but that's because he scored 2 2-point conversions when Jake Elliott went out. Otherwise, it would have been 16 points. And most quarterbacks are not scoring more than 16 points on the Dallas Cowboys. They don't have Sean Lee, but still, I think this might be dicey again. Austin Eckler is a nice flex option if you think this is going to be another blowout, because let me tell you, in 2 blowouts, he's been pretty decent. Now, it could just be because of that, but he is getting 5.3 yards per carry, 9.4 yards per reception. So when he does touch the ball, it's definitely productive. 5 touchdowns and only 52 touches. pretty good. According to Pro Football Focus, there is. I did this article actually for Fantasy Alarm that was basically like asking trivia questions that are like surprising stats, and I was asking which edge rusher has the most quarterback pressures in the league. It's Joey Bosa, by the way, his second-year guy over at Los Angeles, 54. The second person is Melvin Ingram, also on the Chargers with 53. That's right, 107 quarterback pressures from 2 players on the Chargers. It's really intense. So I think you could also play their defense, even against Dak Prescott, especially with that Ezekiel Elliott. Hunter Henry, I don't know what to tell you guys. 3 terrible games in a row, and it's not because of Antonio Gates, you guys, who also has still only scored 1 touchdown to get that record. Remember us joking about that?
Yeah.
That's real. That's still happening. And Mike Williams is questionable. He is getting more work, but he's not fantasy relevant unless you're in a super deep league. But come on now.
All right, Ashley, how about the Cowboys?
Well, I'm not playing the Cowboys defense. They're just not good enough to play. You got better streaming options out there, so you're not playing them. But in terms of starters, as we thought, Alfred Morris is the RB1 and had the bulk of the carries, despite the fact that Rod Smith got the start. And he was in for more snaps than Morris, which is interesting.
It's really weird.
But when we look at carries across both players, Morris had 17 carries for 91 yards compared to Smith's 8 carries for 11 yards. Clearly, we can see who was the more productive back in this case. And starting isn't always telling you in terms of who the actual starter is. It may just be that particular play that they want to unfold, and that's why Rod Smith maybe led better that play. But Alfred Morris is the guy. I think we have seen this, and in terms of who you should be starting, that is who you should play. I don't think Rod Smith is even worth a flex at this point. I don't like it. Dez Bryant, he caught 8 of 14 targets for 63 yards, and that's not the numbers that you want to see. I will acknowledge that. But I don't know how you can bench a guy who averages 10 targets a game. It just is what it is. He's a wide receiver 2 this week. I will say that until this offense sorts itself out. But again, 10 targets, you have to play him. It just is what it is. And you got to hope for the best. And 63 yards isn't terrible. It's wide receiver 2, flex, low numbers. But, it is what it is. So you're playing him. My sleeper is Dak Prescott. I've bumped him out of my starting role. And Brandon may disagree with me on this, but he completed 18 of 31 passes for 145 yards and 3 interceptions against the Eagles. Ouch. It was bad. And in the past 4 weeks, he's only had 1 good game. Just 1. And he has a tough matchup this week. So the Chargers are a better defense than people think they are. So he doesn't have a cakewalk happening this week. Now, a lot of this has to do with the loss of their left tackle that Brandon mentioned, Tyron Smith, who did practice on Tuesday. But it is not a lock that he is going to return this week. So I think you have to look elsewhere until Smith returns. He has been what the problem here has been in terms of the running game, in terms of Dak. I mean, Dak literally the moment Smith has gone out has completely tanked. So for the most part, I can't tell you to play Dak Prescott until Smith is playing. So what I would suggest is that you look for your injury report, and the most important person to look for is Tyron Smith to see if he is active for the game. And at that point, you can decide to play Dak Prescott, but you cannot play him if Tyron Smith is not playing. It is what it is. And then for that fact, this offense is completely imploding without him. So you can't play Jason Witten, you can't play Terrence Williams, and you can't play Cole Beasley until Dak gets back on track, which he hasn't done yet. So unfortunately, you really have Alfred Morris and Dez Bryant that you can play on this team.
There you go.
One of our listeners right now on YouTube just asked a question if you would start Alfred Morris over Samaje Perine this week. They're both on Thanksgiving. So what do you think?
Yes, I would.
All right. I like it. I think
guys?
they're both good plays.
I like Samaje this week.
Against Washington or against the Giants? Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like Samaje better.
I do, but my issue is that Samaje Perine seems like the obvious choice with Chris Thompson being hurt, which means Gruden will not do it.
Yeah, it's gonna be that Byron Marshall
options.
Yeah, it's I think they're running out of options. Yeah, I agree. But they don't really run the ball very often. And Chris Thompson's more of a passing guy. I don't really know how much.
I know, but logic
that
would tell you they should play Perine, which means they're not going to do it, right? Because they have not followed logic this entire season. So,
how many more injuries can Kirk Cousins overcome? I mean, serious question.
Karma.
It's bad. Okay, you guys. So I don't know if you have heard about it or not, but there is this website called Zola.com. It is ZOLA.com. Zola Registry has everything that you love about your favorite department store, plus things like honeymoon funds, fitness classes, wine subscriptions, and more. That's right. If you're getting married, you need to go and get an account at Zola.com. And we are so excited to have them as a sponsor this week. They have over 500 top brands and 50,000 gifts to experience and cash funds. It's kind of like just this one-stop shop. To sign up with Zola and receive a $50 credit towards your registry, go to Zola.com/fantasy football. That's right. Zola.com, ZOLA.com/fantasy football. They have this group gifting feature so that you can register and not feel bad about those big ticket items because people could just go in on it together, which is awesome. You can personalize your registry with pictures and notes, etc. They have the price matching, free shipping every single day. It's a great app. I mean, it's just like pretty much everything that you need. I wish that I had it when I got married back in the day, because they also have a free wedding suite that has things like free wedding websites and guest list manager and everything like that. So super easy to use. Go check it out. Again, to sign up for Zola, go to ZOLA.com/fantasy football. Again, that's Zola.com/fantasy football, and you'll receive a $50 credit towards your registry.
All right. Now we got the game of the week, Thursday night. New York Giants, the Washington Redskins.
Oh, yeah. Game of the week. You're right. Well, they beat the Chiefs. Chiefs and the Broncos. Way to go, AFC West.
Congrats.
Yep. Wow. All right. Well, listen, there was crazy wind going on. I don't know. The only person that I would definitely go back to, and I'm sorry for everybody that played him, but by the way, it was a horrible week for tight ends. Horrible for the top tight ends.
Really bad.
Evan Ingram was bad. I get it. I'm not even going to go into it. It was terrible wins, like we said. But listen, last week was only the second time all year that he had fewer than 4 catches. Washington gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. The weather should be fine. It is only going to be 46, but it's going to be sunny, no wind. You're fine. Also, I'm digging my guy Orleans Darkwa again, you guys. Yep. This guy's actually a steady Eddie. He's not flashy. He's not going to get you a 25-point game, but man, he's pretty decent. He's a decent running back. And this year, I'll take it. I will take decent. 74 yards and a touchdown against the Chiefs. Washington gives up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Go with it. He was he was on the injury report and limited because of a hamstring. He's not on the injury report anymore, so don't worry about that. It's over. You're good. It was more like maintenance. That's fine. Who was the highest scoring wide receiver on the New York Giants in Week 11, you guys?
I don't know. No one I know.
Roger Lewis.
I was going to say, was it even a receiver?
Caught 3 of his 4 targets for 55 yards. Sterling Shepard became a de facto number 1 once Odell Beckham and Brandon Marshall went out, but he has been dealing with these migraines. He's still questionable. I don't feel good about this migraine situation. That's what held him out last week. I'm incredibly concerned. I really hope it's not involved with concussions. It's all very scary to me. But as of right now...
Botox.
Yeah, actually, exactly. That's how we came up with Botox, everyone. It was originally for headaches. So go get it.
Well, I think it was originally for sweating.
Well, see, lots of uses.
Lots of uses, but maybe against maybe a banned substance.
Exactly. Tavares King is the other wide receiver on this team, if you need to know that. And Washington allows the 13 fewest, though, points to wide receivers. So I don't love anyone. Eli Manning scored 0 touchdowns again in Week 11. It's a good matchup. But even when he wins games, he doesn't score fantasy points. So I don't feel good about him. I'm begging the Giants to not have Shane Vereen throw another pass in high winds. What was that all about?
Such bad decision making.
So dumb. Bad. It was so Giants. Anyway, moving on. It's over. Don't start the kicker defense.
All right, Washington suffered a huge loss last week. Chris Thompson was placed on IR after breaking his right fibula last week. They also placed Terrell Pryor on IR after he underwent surgery on his ankle. This is after placing their other running back, Rob Kelly, on IR the week before. Jordan Reed is still questionable, but doesn't look good since he hasn't practiced all week. So Washington is suffering. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about the people that are actually playing. Kirk Cousins has had back-to-back great games. This is a fantastic matchup. 5 out of the last 7 quarterbacks playing the Giants have had 20 or more fantasy points, so you can start him. Vernon Davis had another solid game, but nothing great. But as we said, for tight ends, it was solid. This has to be a week he's going to get double digits, either with a touchdown or possibly even with 100 yards receiving. Giants give up the absolute most fantasy points to tight ends. So I think Davis is going to do very well. We just talked about him for a second, but Samaje Perine is the leading back for Washington. And Ashley said, so now Byron Marshall, that's the receiving back, is probably going to get more fantasy points.
I'm just saying there's a chance because
okay.
They don't follow logic.
No, they don't. But Perine did very well last week with 117 yards rushing and a touchdown. If I owned him, I would start him this week, you guys. I like Perine a lot. Jamison Crowder, Josh Doxson, and Ryan Grant in that order are all great flex options this week. Crowder has had 19 targets in the last 2 games and 14 targets for Doxson. They both have the opportunity to do well against the Giants. Just the hard part is they're not producing that well in standard leagues. And PPR, I love them. In standard, they're okay. They're good enough flex, in my opinion. Washington's defense, just because, hey, it's the Giants. So you can start the Redskins defense if you need them. Absolutely. All right, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Atlanta Falcons. Well, Fitzpatrick did pretty well last week. 275 yards passing with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. 4 out of the last 5 quarterbacks have had 18 or more fantasy points against Atlanta. That's including Russell Wilson, who had over 30 fantasy points last week against the Falcons. So Fitzpatrick, I think, is a very great streaming option this week. Mike Evans is always a must start. I will say that this is a tough matchup. Atlanta gives up the 5th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. In fact, if it wasn't for that last minute touchdown from Baldwin last week, they haven't given up double digits performance to a wide receiver in the last 3 games. So of course you're starting Evans, but I would really think about it before putting Deshaun Jackson in my lineup, let's say. But you can't bench Evans. I keep thinking it's going to be the week for Doug Martin, but he just can't do much. It's so sad. He rushed 19 times last week for 38 yards. That is 2 yards a carry. With this tough matchup, I would try not to start him. Only one running back has had more than 6 fantasy points since week 7 in standard leagues. So this is going to be tough regardless, even if he was on a hot streak right now, which he's not. I am not starting Cameron Brate either. He has only had 1 reception in each of his last 3 games. Atlanta gives up the 10th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. I know Howard had a big game last week, but don't forget, Howard didn't have a catch the week before and had negative points the week before that. So it might seem sexy to you, but it might be a complete bust where you actually might be losing points or get absolutely no points starting him. So I would definitely find a better tight end option than going for the number 2 tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Bucs defense, obviously, are on the bench. Brandon, the Falcons.
They should be on the bench, period, but they have to put someone out there, I heard. Those are the rules.
Those are the rules.
Brutal.
Okay. Let me tell you this. Julio Jones has 786 receiving yards over the course of 10 games. It's tied with Brandon Cooks for the 4th most among tight ends or among wide receivers. And he is the only wide receiver with more than 500 yards on the season with only 1 touchdown.
It's crazy.
Amazing. Still have to play him, though. A lot of volume. Sorry. Matt Ryan's meh, but the Bucs give up the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they're so bad that I don't know if I can tell you to bench him. I should probably, because he's meh every week. But gosh, how do you do that? I don't think I can. So there you go. However, I will say that Devonta Freeman is still in concussion protocol. Doesn't look good. Coleman, even against the Seattle Seahawks, was pretty decent last week. So I would definitely keep an eye on him. He did score a rushing touchdown. And I think that he's even a flex, even if Freeman is playing. And the Bucs give up the 14th most fantasy points to opposing running backs in standard. I think he'll be fine. Another elite flex option, frankly, is Mohamed Sanu, because that guy's been scoring touchdowns. I mean, Julio Jones can't score one to save his life. But you know what? There was Sanu, another touchdown last week. He has a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games. And I just think this is to tick everyone off that it has Julio Jones on their team. Matt Bryant, yes. Matt on the defense. I think Fitzpatrick, you guys, do you know that Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston have the same number of wins this season as starting quarterbacks?
Do they really? Fitzmagic.
Fitzpatrick has only technically started 2 games, and he's won both. It's a bad matchup for Austin Hooper, and he was last week. He caught both of his targets, but was for -1 yards. He's so boom or bust. I don't know what to tell you guys other than this is also a terrible matchup. So yeah, and then I don't think Taylor Gabriel is a sleeper this week. FYI.
All right, we got the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals game of the week. Ooh, I don't know. Monday Night Football is really good, but this one's close.
Did I tell you that Jaguars Cleveland game would be unwatchable?
Yeah,
it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And Bortles didn't do what I needed him to do.
However, another trivia question for you: which NFL team allows the absolute fewest yards per carry in the National Football League?
I'm going to go ahead and guess the Browns.
The Bengals.
Right. It is the Browns. Browns. They only allow 3.1 yards per carry on average. The second is tied between the Denver Broncos and the Minnesota Vikings.
Wow.
So there is some hope for this horrible season.
That Browns is more than Adrian Peterson's average the last 4 games.
Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, stroke my beard. Oh, yeah. Not so sad about losing him, right, Courtney?
Maybe I should drop him again so he can play really well.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you should. You absolutely should. All right. So Deshaun Kaiser is going to be the quarterback supposedly the rest of the season. That's what they've announced. How brave. It's not like you did this in the preseason or anything and totally lied to us, Hugh Jackson. Also, what he said is that he's so excited to have Josh Gordon back. Gordon's back at practice. He won't be back until week 13 at the earliest. He actually said, quote, it's like Christmas. He's a new toy. I know what's in that box, but I just want to see how good it is. Sounds like Courtney. Courtney used to try to sneak into those Christmas presents when we were kids.
She always snuck into Christmas gifts. So, Courtney hates surprises.
Meanwhile, Corey Coleman's the real Christmas gift that's giving early. He caught 6 of his 11 targets for 80 yards last week. So what's in that box, Hugh? Am I right? Am I right?
He's not excited about that box.
No, that box is not as that one has Gwyneth Paltrow's head in it.
It had worse wrapping under the tree.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you just do a 7 reference?
I did.
I was like, you could just skip over the fact that you just.
I didn't want to bring
it up. Box? What's in the box?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was like one of the most disturbing scenes of my childhood. Kevin Spacey.
That's what Brad he thinks of Corey Coleman. Sad. Okay, so sleepers. I'm back on Duke Johnson as a flex. You guys caught 4 of his 6 targets for 56 yards and a touchdown last week. He's so good, but he's brown. I don't know what to say about that. Isaiah Crowell back to being Isaiah Crowell. Everybody, 11 times for 18 yards last week is how he carried the ball. Yowza. No kicker or defense, obviously.
All right, the Cincinnati Bengals, another great streamer for Week 12 is Andy Dalton. Cleveland gives up the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And a huge part of that is when Andy Dalton scores over 28 fantasy points against them in Week 4. So he's already done it once this year. I think he could do well again this year. You were, of course, starting AJ Green. He had 5 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown last time they met. Dalton got a lot of his fantasy points connected with tight end Tyler Kroft for 6 receptions, 68 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that was his best game by far for Kroft. But he still is a must start. So I think he's going to do well against Cleveland again. You can start the Cincinnati's defense. Come on. We all know that already. Joe Mixon had his breakout game last week, rushing 20 times for 49 yards. Period. Well done.
Unbelievable. Well we didn't think he'd be this bad if he got the touches, right? I mean, we just didn't think he'd get the touches, but this is epic.
It's epic. It's epic.
It's pretty bad.
I will say that 4 running backs in the last 3 games have had double digits against the Browns, and 3 of them had 52 yards or less rushing, which is good news for Mixon, seeing how he's only rushed over 52 yards once this year. So he will need a touchdown to be fantasy relevant, but so do a lot of running backs, let's be honest. So this is kind of right up his mojo. He's going to get that early touchdown, right, in the first half, and you're all excited because he's got like 20 yards and a touchdown, woohoo. But then he only gets another 20 yards the rest of the game. But that's okay. That's enough to be in your lineup.
If he gets the touchdown.
Yes. but he's been doing that pretty well.
I will say this because I rag on him a lot. This is a coaching issue, in my opinion. It's not a talent issue. It's an offensive line issue and a coaching issue. So let's hope for better next year.
That's not going to change.
It won't change this year for
like,
Joe Mixon owners. No, I'm just saying let's hope better for next year.
All right. Well, you're not going to start the kicker, and we're moving on to the next game of the week. Tennessee Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. Man, there's so many good matchups this week. My mind is blown. Woo! My mind is blown. Woo! It's like, where have all the good teams gone? They're gone. They don't exist.
Nice.
You can start Ryan Suckup. You're welcome. There it is. That's the guy. That's the one you're starting. No quarterback has had over 18 fantasy points against the Colts in the last 5 weeks, including Marcus Mariota in week 6. In fact, Mariota has only had 1 game over 18 fantasy points this year. He would have had over 18 fantasy points last week if he hadn't thrown for 4 interceptions. Hello. I know on paper this looks like a good start, but to me, it is still a scary play. Marcus Mariota. Not what we thought he was going to be. Both Murray and Henry did very well the last time they played the Colts, but they will need to get close to the end zone because that is the only way that they're going to get fantasy points because it's not going to be through yards. Henry has only had 60 or more yards rushing twice this year, and Murray's only done it once. So I think they both can get touchdowns this week, but that's how they're going to get their fantasy points is through touchdowns, not yardage. Rashard Matthews appears to have his groove back, getting 2 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks and over 200 yards. So I like him again this week, but I will say that the Colts typically give up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver 2 or 3. So I'm okay if you want to take a flyer in leagues on Corey Davis, who has had 17 targets in the last 2 games. I don't think that's a bad call this week, and he could be the one that actually comes out on top. Delaney Walker hasn't had a touchdown all season, but he is the 7th highest scoring touchdown in standard leagues. Hello, tight ends are awful. They're the worst. He is 3rd in both receptions and yards. So put him in your lineup, especially PPR. Delaney Walker is a must start. Tennessee Titans defense is on the bench, even though they're playing the Colts. It's not bad. It's not bad. Again, we have to have him on the field. It's just part of the rules.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon, the Colts.
Jacoby Brissett is still in concussion protocol, but he is practicing. I think this is kind of the Philip Rivers situation where that's a good sign that he's going to play. I don't hate him in this matchup.
I don't either.
I think if you're streaming, I do not hate Jacoby Brissett. And I think that is bold. So there you go. Titans give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Obviously, we saw Big Ben do well at home finally, which was nice. But yeah, T.Y. Hilton often plays well in good matchups. So yeah, I don't know. Tennessee gives up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. We saw Antonio Brown go bananas last week. So that got me kind of excited. They've allowed 15 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers so far this year. So that's good. He sort of petered out before the bye with only 2 catches for 9 yards against Pittsburgh. But it was kind of a tough matchup. So I'm okay with rolling with Jack Doyle again. He still hasn't had less than 5 targets since week 1. And Tennessee does give up the 6th fewest points to opposing tight ends, but tight ends are terrible. So I think he's going to get a lot of work. I don't hate it. How many yards does Frank Gore need to do to rush past LaDainian Tomlinson and have the 5th most rushing yards in the NFL?
45.
I'm going to guess less than 100.
No, but it's 111. But he's going to be over Jerome Bettis if he rushes for 89. I think he's going to hit both of those this year. That's what I'm saying. That's crazy. He's going to have more career rushing yards than LaDainian Tomlinson. That's nuts. He's still a sleeper, though, because he's on the Colts. But he's actually been pretty decent. So if you just need solid and you got a lot of, boomer bust guys, meh. And then Moncrief scored a touchdown last week before the bye, but, it was only his 2nd on the season, so I don't love him. And he's only had 4 targets in 3 games, so it's like, I don't know what else to tell you. And I think they're going to get Gore to those rushing titles that I just mentioned, which is why I'm also not going to do Marlon Mack. But again, if you're in Dynasty, he'll be fine in the future.
Awesome. All right, Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs. Ashley.
So let's start with that delightful quarterback situation because, well, we have to. We have to start with this. So Nathan Peterman, as we discussed last week, got the start with the team feeling he gave them the best chance to win. And we were on our SiriusXM show, and I think we talked about it then. I don't know if we were on air or talking off it, but it was about how the coach, I think we were on there for it. The coach basically says, hey, we see them every day in practice and we know. And Tyrod Taylor is historically not a great practice quarterback. And he always goes out and he does better in the game than he does in practice. So I find this really interesting that, again, he gave him the best chance to win. Really? Because as Brandon mentioned, he was pulled at halftime after completing 6 of 14 passes for only 66 yards and a whopping 5 interceptions. 5. To give you some perspective here, it took Peterman only 9 pass attempts to throw 4 of those 5 picks. 9 attempts and he had 4 picks. That is insane. Taylor had thrown for just 3 interceptions all season long on 254 pass attempts. But again, Nathan Peterman gives them the best chance to win here, guys. Now, Taylor came in the second half when it was already 40-7 and completed 15 to 25 passes for 158 yards and 1 touchdown. He ran for a 2-yard score as well. He did lose a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. But regardless of that, that was still far better than what Nathan Peterman did. In fairness to what Brandon said, what a horrible game to throw this guy in on with a very tough defense. It was just bad coaching, bad decision making all around. Now, with that said, Taylor has been named the starter for Week 12. That happened today. So, because it would be laughable to not start Taylor at this point, but it's the Bills, so I don't know what to say. What I can say is, Taylor, I would like to personally apologize to you for the crap that you have to endure playing for the Buffalo Bills. And Bills fans, I'm also looking at you because we have heard the Bills fans also do not like Tyrod Taylor, and this is part of the reason, and it's ridiculous. We've seen it here in Denver when it came to Tim Tebow of fans actually swaying coaching decisions, although I will not place blame on the fans for that because that's coaching. But pull it together, guys. Don't be asking for Nathan Peterman. He's not ready. He's not your guy. Okay? Now, Taylor has a great matchup and could score over 20 points this week. He could. But he should be a good streaming option, but I just don't know where his head is at this point. I'd like to think that he's a pro and can go out there and still perform, but I mean, how much can you put the guy through at this point? You know, I just don't know.
His head's in Denver.
I hope so.
Me too.
That would be great if his head was in Denver. But I don't know. I mean, the poor guy,
his
right?
heart is.
Yeah, he's wishing for it. So he does have a good matchup. You could stream Tyrod Taylor, but it's risky because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. This is the Bills organization, and they don't make good decisions. So he could throw 1 interception, and they could throw Nathan Peterman back in. Literally, we can't tell you. It's a crazy situation. So with that said, my sleepers are, and LaShawn McCoy is obviously a starter. He had 114 yards and a touchdown and a catch for 12 yards with a touchdown on top of that. We expected that they were going to heavily rely on McCoy, especially with Nathan Peterman, and they certainly did. I think this week will be no different. He is your only starter. Sleepers, Charles Clay, he got 3 or 4 targets for 27 yards, so that was not great. But he did have a touchdown that was overturned due to a penalty. So we were kind of seeing at least some of that targets that you were going to get prior to him being injured. He has a really bad matchup. But I think he is worth a shot, especially with Kelvin Benjamin, if he doesn't play. He is still, day-to-day, so Charles Clay, I think, is someone that you could certainly play. Zay Jones is also interesting to me this week. He caught 4 of 7 targets for 68 yards, and he was the top receiver with Benjamin leaving the game and with Matthews being inactive. I don't know how you can't be with the other 2 receivers starting, but he at least did okay. He's a risky play, but both Matthews and Calvin Benjamin's status is still up in the air. So you can play him if neither of them play because that automatically puts him into the wide receiver 1 position. Calvin Benjamin, as I said, he did avoid the ACL damage, so that's good news, but check your reports come Sunday because it's not good as of right now. He's not practicing.
All right, the Chiefs.
Well, the biggest news for the Chiefs is that today they signed Darrelle Revis. Now, I know it's defense and it's a cornerback, but that's fascinating to me. We don't know how in shape he is, although Andy Reid said he might start this weekend. Yes. The whole thing is kind of mind-blowing. And it's a holiday. I don't know what's going on, but
I'm waiting for Megatron.
Oh, bring it back. Bring it back.
Bring it back. Bring it back.
We
So
love you so
glorious.
much. We miss you so much. I was actually on the Colton and the Wolf Band show last night for Sirius XM, and they brought up Larry Fitzgerald, and I got kind of verklempt thinking about him not being in the league anymore.
Yeah,
There's certain people that really affect me. So anyway, I'm going to say this. Kareem Hunt still leads the league in terms of yards from scrimmage, or not the league, the AFC, I should say, not the NFC, because that is someone else. But, you can't sit him. And I will say that in 3 of his last 4 home games, he's had at least 100 total yards, but he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. It's probably what he's going to do is he's going to get you over 100 yards and not score you a touchdown. Just get comfortable with that. That's who he is now, because Andy Reid is also trying to get cute and having Travis Kelce throw in the wind to throw an interception. People and bad coaching decisions drive me crazy.
Okay, it's not usually Andy Reid's MO. Surprising.
Unless it's a big game, and then his mind goes. But okay, so I'm going to go back to the Alex Smith well. I think he's going to score about 18 fantasy points this week against the Bills. The Bills are just kind of depressed because their coach has gone rogue. They've been messing with their quarterback situation. I just think the whole team is kind of imploded, and they put them in bad positions in terms of field positions. So I just think that they're going to be fine. Travis Kelce did catch 8 of his 14 targets for 109 yards in Week 11 against the Giants, but that still was a disappointment because he was like the first tight end ever to not score a touchdown against the Giants. So, I mean, even that was disappointing. So, it was a little bit downtrodden. Tyreek Hill caught all 7 of his targets for 68 yards. But man, I just, they're going to have to use other people, which, speaking of, Albert Wilson is questionable with a hamstring. This is his first time practicing. He is practicing for the first time since week 8. So hopefully he gets back. I know he's not super flashy, but every once in a while he just gets enough yards to get the defenders a little bit off of Tyreek Hill. I think that'll help a lot. So overall, though, I think this is going to be a good game for the Chiefs. And, I just think the Bills are kind of imploding, and I think that Chiefs Stadium is a nice boon.
You know who I'm going to be sad once they're done with the league? Matt Castle. It's always like a where's Waldo?
No.
Where's Waldo every year?
Oh, yeah, like where is he? Yeah.
And you're like, you don't even know where he is until week 5, and all of a sudden he's in, right? He's in. And you're like, oh my God, he's on what team? You don't even know. It's amazing. I'm going to miss that. Miss that
Josh
surprise.
McCown of our time.
Cowan, yeah. Or Fitzy.
Well, McCown's actually like the starter and successful, and Matt Castle, I think, is like more of like a Hasselback.
Well, he was the starter. The younger Hasselbeck?
Yeah.
Not the older one that was the Seattle starter, right?
No.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know. Anyways, surprise.
Backup
Miami Dolphins
extraordinaire.
at the New England Patriots.
I think this could be a really interesting game. I'm not gonna lie to you. Brandon's giving me a look like she disagrees. I don't know.
I am intrigued.
The Dolphins always give the Patriots a run for their money.
It's true.
They do. And the Patriots have a bad defense this year, which is a rarity in the last decade. So this is an interesting matchup for me. I think this one could be actually an interesting game to watch. I will say that. But you're starting Jarvis Landry. He caught 6 of 11 for 95 yards and a touchdown. And he seems to be able to succeed now, regardless of what quarterback is in, and is the starter each week. We were struggling a little bit. I think it was week 7 and 8 was when Matt Moore played, I want to say. He didn't do super great. He does great in the games where Matt Moore comes in halfway through the game and then he's okay. And then the next week you're like, ooh, what happened? But I think he's going to be okay. The Patriots have the 4th most points to wideouts. So this, will help with the possible bumpy waters with Moore. I think we're going to be okay this week. Devontae Parker, he did not have the game that we were accustomed to, catching only 4 of 9 targets for a measly 26 yards. He just doesn't seem to have the chemistry with Moore, and Moore seems to have that with Stills. And so I think that's the problem, is that Stills and Devontae Parker are both big play vertical threats, and I think that Moore just has better chemistry with Stills than he does with Parker. And so I'm still, because it's a good matchup, I'm okay with you playing Parker in a flex. But to be honest with you, Kenny Stills, I think, is a more solid flex option, as he does really good. He does really well in good matchups. And then he's caught 7 of 8 last week for 180 yards and a touchdown. And still, as I said, is Moore's guy. So much so that he caught 3 of Moore's 4 touchdowns this season. 3 of the 4 that Moore has gone to Kenny Stills. So he is a really good flex option. I would maybe even say, okay, for a wide receiver too. So something to think about. Sleepers, after having 2 solid weeks with no fewer than 90 yards, Kenyon Drake really stunk it up last week. I mean, he did. I'm not going to lie to you. He rushed 7 times for 4 yards. Ouch. And then 1 catch for 10 yards. He may have been in more snaps than Damian Williams, but Williams had more touches than Drake. And therefore, Drake's touches have been trending down. So I don't love that. Damian Williams rushed 10 times for 78 yards and caught 1 pass for 24. But I want to point out that 69 yards of the 78 was on 1 play. So again, do what you want. To me, we're just seeing a little bit of back and forth here. I mean, flex at best. Don't put them in an RB2. That's just, you just don't know which one is actually going to hit this week. It is a really good matchup for running backs. So again, you don't know which one. So I'm okay with the flex just because of the matchup. But again, with that, at your own risk. And Jay Cutler, he is in concussion protocol. So they are going to make a decision closer to game day. Matt Moore, he was 17 of 20 for 282 yards and a touchdown. So you could argue that the production is better with Moore than Cutler. I don't think it's even really an argument when you look at stats for the most part. So let's hope it's Moore, but it could be Cutler. So definitely check before you put anyone in.
All right. The Patriots.
Oh, man. I'm so glad that her fantasy football was like the only place where someone would tell you that the Raiders were going to get their ass kicked by the Patriots. And after the fact, doesn't that sound like a weird sentence? Like, how are we the only people that called that? That's so really crazy. Weird. So, yeah, they've kicked their butts. So, Rob Gronkowski had a disappointing game, but you're going to go back to him. There's no doubt about it. Miami gives up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So, just get over it. It's expected that Chris Hogan is not going to play again, you guys. Still not practicing. It's really unfortunate. So, keep him in your thoughts. He has a shoulder injury, sidelined at Wednesday's practice. Also questionable is Danny Amendola, but they think that he's going to practice. He was just limited with that knee injury. I think they just kind of keep him limited all season because he's Danny Amendola and he'll get out there. He did catch 8 of his 9 passes for 66 yards and a touchdown last week. This week, he's playing against Miami. And as Ashley said, they do play them a little bit tougher. So, I mean, I think it's kind of, a hit or miss. They just weren't really going to Gronk, and it was just kind of a weird game. I will say this, Brandon Cooks has been pretty darn decent. I think that you just can't ignore someone who has 149 yards and a touchdown last week, 74 the week before. But the problem is, the week before that, he caught 5 passes for 26 yards. Sometimes that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen against Miami, though. I think it's somewhere between 70 and 90 yards, may or may not have a touchdown. So I'm going with him. And it seems to me that it's pretty clear that Dion Lewis, again, is the main running back for the New England Patriots. I think they are going to run it against Miami. I think they're going to use him as a ground and pound guy. He's not the pass catching guy. That's fine. That's kind of Rex Burkhead. Now it seems like he's taking more from James White, but I'm still not into Burkhead or White personally. They're still too New England-y for me. If you have to go to the Patriots, you have to go with Dion Lewis. Tom Brady has the most passing yards in the league right now. And before you yawn and say, yeah, duh, actually, I'm surprised it's not Drew Brees. Drew Brees is 4th. This is weird. Yeah. Brady usually is not leading the league in passing yards. That's not a normal statement. So I did want to say that, but he's definitely a must start as well. And I start their defense even in this particular instance because they're playing against 2 guys that, turnovers can happen. So I'm playing their defense and their kicker.
All right. Carolina Panthers, the New York Jets. All right, Newton had the best game of his 2017 season with 254 yards, 4 touchdowns, another 95 yards rushing. Amazing. He led his team to an impressive 45-21 win over Miami. He is on the up and up. He now finds himself in the top 6 quarterbacks in the league for fantasy. Now he faces the Jets, who has only faced one really good quarterback this year. So I think Newton should be just fine, and I'm excited about him. There are a few great things working for McCaffrey this week. First of all, he is coming off his best game in his short NFL career, 23 yards rushing with a touchdown and 27 yards receiving with another touchdown. Secondly, the Jets tend to give up most of their fantasy points to pass-catching backs. This all bodes well for Mr. Christian McCaffrey. The Jets haven't given up double-digit points to 2 running backs on the same team since week 1 and 2. That's not great for Mr. Jonathan Stewart, who isn't a bad flex, but he's been a little all over the board and only has had 1 touchdown this year. He has fumbled 3 times, which is more than any other year he's played in the NFL, but 1. He fumbled 1 year 4 times. But that, is only in 10 games. So yeah, he's having a little harder time this year. That's all I'm saying. A little tougher time. Devin Funchess, there was plenty of fantasy points to go around before Carolina's bye. Funchess had 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had his potential game, right? This is the guy that we've been saying, I think he could be so good. Well, finally, he had that great game. He did what we all knew he could in this matchup, and this is going to be a great matchup for him. The Jets have given up 6 touchdowns to receivers in the last 4 games. So Funchess, I think, will find the end zone at least once. I like him. I like the Carolinas defense. Greg Olsen, you guys, is back at least practice. He says he's ready to suit up, and I am so excited. I am scared to just slip him into my lineup in fear that he may just be a decoy for the first game or 2, but keep an eye on his injury report, guys. It's a great matchup. I love me some Olsen. I am so excited. So excited. As for the Jets, this is going to be a tougher matchup for all of them. Only 2 tight ends have had more than 8 fantasy points against the Panthers, and that is the best matchup for the whole team. So I love this team, but I am trying not to start any of them. Even Robbie Anderson is risky. The ceiling is 11 fantasy points in standard leagues, and the floor is 6 for receivers against Carolina. That might be good enough for you. And if it is, then play him. He has upside, obviously, because he's been the hot hand. But I'm just saying it's not going to be a game where you're like amazed by the fact that a Jet wide receiver can score that many fantasy points. Just a quick update. Matt Forte is listed as questionable, but is not practicing. So that will most likely leave Bilal Powell and Elijah McGuire to take over again. But the Panthers give up the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So not my favorite play this week. I'm not playing the Jets defense, and I'm not playing the kicker. All right, we got the Chicago Bears, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh, the Bears. Well, let's start with this too. The Chicago Bears picked up Cairo Santos from the Kansas City Chiefs. They are done with Connor Barth when he missed the potentially game-tying field goal with 3 seconds left on the clock last week. It was devastating. So they moved on. But Cairo Santos had an 84.8 completion rate for his career. He did have a hamstring injury, which is why the Chiefs originally cut him. He's fine now. I think he's an interesting grab. Kickers matter if you play with them, people. Kickers matter. The Philadelphia Eagles defense is pretty tough, but I still don't think the Bears are going to get shut out. I could be wrong on that, but I just feel like Jordan Howard is a beast because, again, last week, it just happens. Huge. And I know that the Philadelphia Eagles are really good against the run. They give the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. It just doesn't seem to matter about matchups with him, though, because they give him the ball so often. 125 yards and a touchdown last week. You just can't argue with that. They are starting to use Tariq Cohen again, though, you guys. Double-digit points in even standard scoring leagues last week. He played his most snaps since back when he was a stud. So I think that Tariq Cohen is an interesting pickup here where they're going to try to mix it up because they're going to have to try to keep Philadelphia off their game because they're still going to want to run the ball, and that's what they're best at is stopping the run. So I think they're going to use Tariq Cohen a little bit to get the defense to break up some. So kind of a sixth sense thing here, but I'm interested in Tariq Cohen. Mitchell Trubisky, I mean, whatever. You can't start him. Dontrell Inman is actually questionable. I didn't realize that he hurt himself during the game, but it looks like he is limited at practice. He did get a big 15-yard catch that helped set them up for the field goal, but overall he was disappointing after his 88-yard premiere. He only had 43 yards last week, caught 3 of his 5 targets. But still, I think that he's an intriguing pick this week. Adam Sheehan is the guy that I want to talk to you about. So we've talked about Adam Sheehan a few times on the show. I brought him up. He's the rookie tight end for the Chicago Bears. And he actually had the highest grade out of all the tight ends in week 11 for Pro Football Focus last week. He caught all 4 of his targets for 41 yards and a touchdown. And by the way, the week before, he caught both of his targets for 39 yards. He didn't have a touchdown. But literally no tight end has ever had a touchdown against Green Bay this season. And actually the Detroit Lions, Shaheen was only the 3rd tight end all season to score a touchdown. This week, he's going up against Philadelphia. They're kind of middle of the road, but he's actually done pretty well in bad matchups. So I'm intrigued in a horrible tight end year with Adam Sheehan.
He's out there
too.
Believe
it. And he is out there, only 1% owned in Yahoo leagues. So if you are desperate and you are looking for a flyer this week, you heard him here, maybe first, maybe fourth, but we are talking about him and other people aren't. So there you go.
All right, Ashley, those Eagles, man, the worst team ever.
You're playing the defense for sure. I don't think they'll be shut out, but I think the Eagles will be able to score plenty of points. From the defensive side. So you're playing them. You're playing Carson Wentz. You are always playing Carson Wentz. Despite the fact this actually isn't that great of a matchup on paper, the Bears D is fairly decent. So, but you're still playing Wentz. You just have to. He's a top 5 quarterback right now. You're playing him. Alshon Jeffrey. You also have to play Alshon Jeffrey. He's kept up his connection with Wentz last week, catching 4 of 7 passes for 67 yards and a touchdown. And he has a decent matchup. So this is absolutely a must start. Zach Ertz, as Brandon mentioned, we've had some of our top quarterbacks, or tight ends that just bombed last week, and he was one of them. He only caught 2 of 5 for 8 yards. It was terrible. It was bad, but you were still playing him. He will now be healthy for a week and should be back to his usual form. You're not going to bench Zach Ertz. But then you get to the running back situation. This is where it gets a little bit more murky. I would say that LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi, we should put in your flex roles. Some might find that controversial, but Blount rushed 13 times for 57 yards, and his value as a goal line back is still there. The question is, does he have value in your roster? And I would say, again, only in the flex position does he have value. Jay Ajayi, he had 7 carries. So it's interesting that Jay Ajayi should be the lead back, but he had less carries than Blount. He actually had less carries than Corey Clement as well, which is interesting. So I don't know if it's an issue of still learning that playbook or what's going on, but right now he's getting the least touches of all the 3 backs. Now, with that said, he had 91 yards, so he's definitely worth a play. But again, even with the snap counts, he's behind Clement and Blount. So he definitely has upside, but I would view him as an RB2 to a flex. Sleepers, Nelson Aguilar, he only had 1 catch last week, and he's kind of fallen off the face of the earth the past 3 weeks. But in fairness, what I will say is he did have a touchdown that was overturned last week. So I don't feel like you can play him in your flex with how he's been trending, because I would rather you play Corey Clement, who has had 50 or more yards in the past 3 weeks and has scored the past 2 weeks. So he could be a decent flex option, and he's also out there for the taking potentially. So Nelson Aguilar just hasn't been trending, he's been trending down, and Clement's turning it up. So he rushed 6 times for 50 yards and a touchdown last week. So again, things are looking good there. Bench, this is more news. Jake Elliott is in concussion protocol. Keep your eye on him, as Caleb Sturgis is eligible to return from IR this week, which means the Eagles might just straight up drop Elliott, because these are kickers. They may just drop him. Not to say that he won't land somewhere, because Elliott is a solid kicker, and I'm not saying they are going to drop Elliott, but keep your eye out on that.
All right, we got the Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers.
Again, you're playing the Seattle defense against the putrid 49ers. That is a for sure. Also for sure is Russell Wilson. He had 258 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he had interception in what was a very brutal loss. And the look on his face when Blair Walsh missed another kick was just, I would not want to be in that locker room.
Why are they shocked by this, though? Remember, he missed that game-winning kick against the Seahawks when he was a Viking. It's so bizarre. Oh.
It's brutal. It's been a couple bad weeks in a row for him, so it was bad. But you're starting Russell Wilson because the numbers
right around
are
the holidays, and it's already depressing for people.
It was that look. Oof. Doug Baldwin, he had nearly a terrible night, but he ended up with 40 yards and a touchdown. And he just always seems to find a way. He just finds a way to make it happen for you. And it is a good matchup. So I would expect him to do as he always does, and probably will still get you a touchdown, even if it's late in the game. He's He's going to put up numbers for you. So you're starting Doug Baldwin. You're also starting Jimmy Graham, 58 yards and a touchdown. And while he doesn't have a great matchup this week on paper, Jimmy Graham is an elite when it comes to tight ends. So you have to play him. Don't get cute. You're playing him. Sleepers, Paul Richardson caught 5 of 8 for 56. Tyler Lockett caught 4 of 5 for 37. Both are viable flex options because of the matchup. But Richardson is the better play out of the two. I keep telling you this, and he keeps putting up bigger numbers. So make sure you're playing P. Rich over Lockett. I don't understand why I get the Lockett questions over P. Rich. So don't do it. Bench, all of the Seattle running backs, they are still terrible. This is not news. But the Niners give up the absolute most points to running backs. So it is possible that one of them, and by one of them, that leaves you with the only options at this point of J.D. McKissick and Eddie Lacy. Yeah, they might be able to do something. Is it worth risking? Absolutely not. But if you felt like doing something crazy or you've got a weird situation, McKissick is the one to play.
All right, we got the 49ers. All right, this is not going to be the game the 49ers want coming off their first win and then a bye to have to face Seattle Seahawks. No. Beathard will be the quarterback, even though he was listed as questionable, but he is back. He is doing just fine. George Kittle should be back this week as well, but I am not starting him either. Neither one of these guys you're starting. And it's not like he has done much this season at all, Mr. Kittle. So you're not going to start him. Trent Taylor is back to practice this week, but it will be Marcus Goodwin as the number 1 wide receiver. Only play him if you have to. But he's definitely your best receiving guy option. Carlos Hyde can be in your lineup. Last time he played the Seahawks, Hyde got 14.3 fantasy points in standard leagues, and 3 running backs in the last 4 weeks have had double digits against the Seahawks. So Hyde could be a decent play. Actually could turn out well for you. So in a really deep league, you can stretch with Mr. Matthew, the backup running back, Burrito, whatever you want to call him. He should be okay. Not great, but in deep leagues, okay might be enough for you. Obviously, the 49ers defense is on your bench as well as the kicker. No names necessary. All right, the Denver Broncos of the Oakland Raiders.
All right, so we're going to start with news on this one as well. The Broncos fired offensive coordinator Mike McCoy and have promoted quarterbacks coach Bill Musgrave to the offensive coordinator position. I'm going to say McCoy was a little bit of a scapegoat here, but I literally can't talk about it without ranting, and then it could take the rest of the show. So I won't do that. What I will say is that Musgrave, he led the Raiders offense to be a top 10 offense last season. And then in classic form, when someone's doing well, they get rid of them because they felt that they had somebody else in the organization that they could promote, which was Todd Downing. And I think we've seen what the Raiders offense have done this year. Not quite as prolific. But what I will say is that's all good and well, but we don't have Derek Carr at the helm in terms of the Broncos. So I don't see a quick turnaround here despite the change from McCoy to Musgrave. Just throwing that out there. So then where does that bring us to our quarterback situation? Brock Osweiler, despite not having an incredibly terrible day, he was 23 of 42 passes for 254 yards and a touchdown. He did have an interception, but he also had 24 yards on 4 carries. So despite that, they have benched him, and Paxton Lynch will be the starting quarterback this week.
Here we go.
To add to the fun, Trevor Siemian will be the backup, not Brock.
Amazing.
So, I think we called this. We said that we will see Trevor Siemian within the next, I think we said 2 to 3 weeks. I didn't think it was going to be this week, to be honest with you, but here we are. I do not believe there will be.
We're going to see Paxton Lynch. We're going to see Trevor Siemian too.
Well, we won't. No, because what I was going to say is Paxton Lynch. This is a done deal. Now that we've got Paxton Lynch in, they're not changing quarterbacks again. So this week, I have everybody basically as sleepers because we need to reevaluate at this point because now we are on our 3rd quarterback for this team, and we don't know the chemistry that Paxton Lynch is going to have with any of these players. We just aren't. And we have a new offensive coordinator as well. So we can't even sit there and say, okay, these are the offensive schemes and the game scripts that they've been doing all season. We don't know because now we have a new coordinator. So this week is just a bit of a cluster. So everybody else is a sleeper. So Demaryius Thomas, he did not have a single catch in the first half. And then he caught 5 of 9 for 64 yards and a touchdown in the second half. He is probably the best option. But, again, we're going off production that we've seen with the other quarterbacks versus Paxton Lynch. Now that we have Lynch, we don't know whether he's going to have that same chemistry. And I don't like the fact that news broke this week in Denver that the Broncos shopped Demaryius Thomas at last month's trade deadline and that they may look to even move him in this offseason. So I don't like the juju that is put out there. You put that into the mix. I don't love that. So that brings us to Emmanuel Sanders. He could be the guy who Lynch likes best. He's a bit more of the slot receiver, which tends to lend itself more to Paxton Lynch. Paxton Lynch is incredibly bad at progressing through his options. He really can only do the first read, and then it's done from there. So it is possible that they will have a majority of the first reads be Emmanuel Sanders. But what I will say is Emmanuel Sanders had a huge game 2 weeks ago, and then he had a terrible game last week with only 2 catches for 15 yards on 8 targets, and he did not practice Wednesday. So that is also bad. So then that brings us to our running backs. The Broncos last week continued to mismanage their running backs, as they've done all season. But we don't know how that'll be managed moving forward. CJ Anderson had 37 yards and a touchdown on 13 carries, and then caught 2 or 3 targets for 19. But Devontae Booker actually had more carries. He had 14 carries for 44 yards, and he had 5 catches for 54 yards off 6 targets. So he out-touched Anderson, and then Jamal Charles has continued to see decline in terms of his carries. He only had 3 carries. So at least we're kind of getting down to a 2-headed monster, and I would think Musgrave will probably still go between those 2, and Jamal Charles will continue to see decline production. Unfortunately, I can't tell you between Booker and Anderson who it's going to be, but this is an easy matchup. So what I can say is you can play both of them in a flex to potentially an RB2 role because it is an easy matchup, and I think that there's going to be enough production for all of them.
All right, the Raiders, there's really no good news for if you own anybody for the Oakland Raiders. Let's just be honest. Not this week especially. I don't really know if there's anything really worth me even diving into, but I'll hit each player for just a second. If you own Carr, you already are sad about life. He has more interceptions and touchdowns in the last 3 games. Marshawn Lynch is only worth something if he gets a touchdown, and that has only happened 3 times this year. He only had 12 yards the last time he played Denver. No bueno. We all know how scary it is to put Cooper in your lineup. We've been there every week. He does see plenty of targets, though. Unfortunately, that doesn't translate if you don't play in PPR. Now, if you do play in PPR, you're okay to still play him. Same with Crabtree, but it's just not getting you the yards and a touchdown or a touchdown. And, there's nothing happening enough in standard leagues to put them in yet. Jared Cook could get you 7 fantasy points at the last 3 tight ends to play the Broncos. So that's good news because 7 points for a tight end is amazing. We'd all take that. So you can play Cook, but that's all. It's really all, you guys. The kickers, maybe. Defense, no. That's even against the Broncos. Paxton Lynch saying something. They're no good.
That is saying something.
This might be a game of the week, too. There's so many games of the week this week. That's what the title should be for week 12. Game of the week. The whole matchups.
Ew.
All right. Well, this one might be good. The New Orleans Saints to the Los Angeles Rams.
So you're playing the defense, despite the fact that this is the best offense in football. The Saints defense has been good. So I think they're going to be able to put up some production there. So I think you can play them. And after my rant about Drew Brees last week, and I realized it was a rant, so I'm sorry for everybody last week, but he went out there and was classic Brees, completing 29 of 41 pass attempts for 385 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he had an interception, but I don't care. He does have a tough matchup against the Rams, but you just can't bench Brees. Not at this point of the season. You can't do it. So you're playing him. You also do not benchmark Ingram, who continues to tear it up. Oh my gosh, you are happy if you're a Mark Ingram owner. He rushed 11 times for 134 yards and a touchdown last week, and he had 3 catches for an additional 21 yards. His matchup this week is pure gold. The Rams give up the 3rd most points to running backs. I love him this week. Love Ingram this week. And I love Alvin Kamara as well. They're the best duo in the NFL right now. I don't think it's even a debate between running backs. They are by far the best committee. They both just have solid roles on this team. Kamara rushed 8 times for 42 yards and had 6 catches for 75. So not only is he a start in PPR, like we said, he is always a start in standard each week as well. He's not just a PPR play. You are playing him in standard. Now, Michael Thomas caught 6 of 11 targets for 91 yards, and he's now had over 90 yards in back-to-back weeks. So that is good news for Michael Thomas owners. No, you still have not gotten your touchdown. I can't help you with that. but he at least is getting you 90 yards. So we're ticking up, guys. This is good news. I'd say he's a low end wide receiver 1 to a wide receiver 2, despite the tough matchup, because it is actually a tough matchup this week. But I think you can play him. You can also play Will Lutz, the kicker. He's the 3rd highest kicker, scoring kicker this season. You are playing him. He is fantastic. Sleepers, Ted Ginn. He bounced back last week, catching 6 of 6 targets for 87 yards. Now, as I mentioned with Michael Thomas, it is not an easy matchup, with the Rams giving up the 7th fewest points to wideouts. But with his floor of targets being around 5, there are far worse flex options out there. So I think he's a decent flex. What I will say is you're still benching Kobe Fleener, despite the fact that he would caught all 5 of his targets for 91 yards. Fleener just hasn't been consistent in any way, shape, or form, and I just don't think you can risk him. There's better options out there than Fleener this week.
All right, let's talk about Rams.
Oh man, do we have to? Do we have to do this? Okay. Well, here's the deal.
Everyone has to take their turn in the sad news.
I know. And the Rams, this is their week. So Robert Woods is out, and he might be out for a couple weeks, quote unquote. That's from Sean McVay, the coach. He suffered a shoulder injury, so now we're left with Sammy Watkins and Cooper Kupp. So Sammy Watkins caught 3 of his 4 targets for 36 yards last week, and Cooper Kupp caught 6 of his 7 targets for 64 yards. Unfortunately, he also lost a fumble, and that's when the game was 7-7. But that fumble kind of changed the momentum of the game, and like everyone stunk it up after that. So I'm not quite sure what to say about that. So here's the deal. You have to start Todd Gurley, who has the absolute most total yards from scrimmage and the most total touchdowns out of anyone in the National Football League. And he did score a touchdown last week. Thank goodness, because everything went downhill from there. There's only one wide receiver in the league. This is kind of funny, who has 3 fumbles, lost fumbles. Guess who it is?
Say it one more time. What was the question?
One wide receiver has 3 lost fumbles on the season. Guess who it is?
Tavon Austin?
Yes.
Nelson Aguilar.
Okay. Really?
Tavon Austin. And he has it on only 12 targets.
He's barely even productive. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So there you go. But Cooper Kupp's right up there. So that's the problem, is that when things don't go well, then like everything kind of crumbles. So I've told you guys this before, but I thought that maybe he could break it going over to Minnesota. But, Goff really is a matchup play. He's a perfect streamer. When he's in a good matchup, he does great. When he's in a bad matchup, he does not. And last week was a good example of that. This is not a great matchup. So I think he's going to be pretty mediocre. It's not a terrible matchup like Minnesota, so I think he'll maybe be like 13 to 16 points, but I don't think he's going to be crazy town. And I'm going to go with you decide between Watkins and Kupp and just kind of, toss a coin up in the air. You're probably going to be as accurate as anybody else. And, that's about it for them. I'm not going to start their defense either in this particular instance. I know that they're at home and that, New Orleans is traveling. There's a possibility that Drew Brees doesn't do well, but man, it makes me sick to my stomach. I am still starting Greg Zuerlein.
There you go. Always. He's the
always.
All right, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Arizona Cardinals.
You are also always starting the Jacksonville defense. That is also an always situation along with Greg Zuerlein. Leonard Fournette, he rushed 28 times for 111 yards, and he had 2 catches for 7 yards. I'll be the first to say I was very nervous for Fournette going into this game because of the fact that he hadn't played well in 3 games, essentially hadn't played really in 3 games. And then he was injured when he did play not last week, but 2 weeks prior to that, and had to come out in the 3rd quarter. But you know what? He did okay. Fournette said that his ankle could bother him the rest of the season. But it seems it could be, it wasn't an issue last week. So we will have to operate as if he's good to go until we see otherwise. So he is a must start, despite the fact that you're going to see him be limited in practice, perhaps the rest of the season. And we're just going to have to get used to that. It's going to be the new normal with Leonard Fournette. Marquise Lee caught 5 of 9 targets for 45 yards last week. And this is pretty much his floor. He has a great matchup this week. So I think he's a great flex play. I think, if that is 9 targets and 45 yards is a floor for a receiver, I think that's a good option. So I think you can play him. I have no sleepers. Bench, Yeldon and Ivory are not getting enough touches to consider them even for flexes at this point. And Keelan Cole is listed as the starter over D.D. Westbrook with Hearns out. But both were targeted 6 times and both caught 3 balls. Cole was for 24 yards. Westbrook was for 35 yards. You're not playing either of them, but just something to note with Hearns out and looking, and not looking feasible for week 12 in terms of how this is going to play out for Bortles. On to the Cardinals. Larry, Larry was Larry. Thank God. He caught 9 of 10 targets for 91 yards and a touchdown and didn't seem to miss a beat with Blaine Gabbert at the helm. You know, the Jags give up the absolute fewest points to wide receivers as well as the absolute fewest points to quarterbacks. So this is not going to be magic in the making this week. But, you know, if you can start another option, I think you should. But again, it's Larry and he's a decent flex option. And Larry seems to always be able to find a way. So I think he's a really, really solid flex to a really low-end wide receiver too, just because they're playing the Jags. Not because of Larry, not because of Blaine Gabbert, is purely because they're playing the Jags. Now, sleepers, Ricky Seals-Jones, you know that guy, right?
None other than Ricky Seals-Jones.
The Ricky Seals-Jones.
Great name.
It is a great name. He's an undrafted rookie wide receiver converted to a tight end on the Cardinals, who caught 3 of his 5 targets for 54 yards and had 2 touchdowns. Yeah, that Ricky Seals-Jones. But you know what? Blaine Gabbert might feel comfortable with him since they would have been practicing together all year because Blaine Gabbert was the 3rd string quarterback. Ricky Seals-Jones wasn't exactly getting practice with the ones. So it's the best matchup of all the receivers in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. So there's a chance that he could score again this week. I'm actually okay with you taking a potential flyer on Ricky Seals-Jones. I'm just saying. I think there's a possibility there. So I'm okay with it. Bench, yes. Adrian Peterson, I am putting him officially on the bench, not even in sleeper status. He's back to sucking. I've said it. And he rushed 14 times and was only able to get 26 yards and caught his only target for 13 yards. 14 times for just 26. He is averaging less than 3 yards a carry the past 4 games. And then you got him playing against the Jags. I absolutely hate him this week. Do not play Adrian Peterson, period. Not in your flex. Do not do it. The only place you can possibly do it, you are crazy. You are crazy. Do not do it. Don't do it. Courtney, come on.
He's in.
I want you to win. Don't do it to yourself. Anyway, John Brown has been diagnosed with turf toe, and he's, coach said he could miss some time. Turf toe is one of those injuries that doesn't sound major, but it is. It is actually very major. Turf toe is bad. So what does this actually mean? It means that Chad Williams will now get a shot at playing. Don't go there and play Chad Williams. If you own John Brown, and you should not be owning John Brown at this point, you can go ahead and drop him because of this turf toe injury. And then Blaine Gabbert, he actually did pretty well. He 22 of 34 for 257 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but okay. But this is a bad matchup, so you're not playing him this week. Don't even attempt it.
All right, we got the Green Bay Packers at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yes, we do. Okay, well, the Green Bay Packers, it's kind of more like drama news than actual football news, which is just sad because last week was the first time this season that they scored 0 points as a team, not fantasy team. Ty Montgomery still not practicing, by the way, due to that rib injury. I don't think you should expect him back. Even if he does come back, I think it'll be on a limited snap count. Also, Aaron Jones, again, is going to be out for a few weeks, sprained an MCL. But here's the other thing. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's Michael Cohen reported that Jones was arrested for speeding, driving without a valid driver's license, and operating a vehicle with a controlled substance in his system back in October.
Weed.
Cocaine.
Controlled. I don't know. Anyway, Coach McCarthy said that he spoke to Aaron after the incident and that he made a mistake. Okay. He has admitted to smoking marijuana 3 hours before being pulled over, but no drugs were found in the car. Why would you admit to that?
Seriously.
Lie until you come home, baby, on that one. Maybe there's something I don't know about testing, but wow. So anyway, I'm not advocating that people lie if they're under the influence. They shouldn't be driving at all, but very weird that he just admitted it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that everybody on this team is tragic with Brett Hundley, except for Davante Adams. Now, Davante Adams has actually scored a touchdown in each of the last 4 away games this season. 6 in a row if you go into 2016 with or without Aaron Rodgers. He has scored a touchdown.
Not away.
It's pretty impressive, you guys. Also,
so
last
he's
week,
pretty much the only player you can play.
Absolutely. He caught 8 of his 10 targets for 126 yards. Now, no one's scoring touchdowns if they're scoring 0 points, but that's intriguing to me. Sad Jordy Nelson. Remember when he played in the NFL? 2 catches, 24 yards last week.
Sad.
I mean, it's like,
I hate even ranking him because I feel so bad putting him so low.
and it's
Doesn't
probably
feel
not
right.
low enough. It's
Yeah,
probably not low enough. So that's just, I did not think that would happen. I was wrong. I thought that he'd be able to rise above this, but it's hard to rise above Brett Hundley. I do think, though, that I'm going to give Brett Hundley a little bit of credit here and then no credit. Baltimore's a really good defense. Tough matchup. I actually thought the play calling was a little bit better for him last week, even though they didn't score any points. He messed up. He had 3 interceptions, but that wasn't the play calling. The play calling was a little bit better, in my opinion. But this week, he has another tough matchup against Pittsburgh, and so I'm not starting anyone except for Devontae Adams, baby. On the other side of this ball, we got Pittsburgh. Man, they just killed it last week at home against Tennessee Titans. It was their first home game in a favorable matchup, and this is another home game in a favorable matchup. So Le'Veon Bell, Green Bay gives up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Bell wasn't all that great last week, but that's because Antonio Brown was like electric. He was just out of control. Antonio Brown was playing out of his mind, which he may do again because Green Bay gives up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So also, if you want to put Juju Smith-Schuster, by the way, he just turned 21. It was today or yesterday. I just retweeted
Happy
it.
birthday.
He had this cute little cartoon of himself on a bike. And he was like, I turned 21, baby. And I was like, oh man, Juju, I just can't hate you. Even though you only had 4 catches, 47 yards last week. But, and he's questionable, everybody. So make sure to watch the injury report with a hamstring. Supposedly he's going to be fine, but he did not practice on Wednesday. And Martavis Bryant, he's digging into those touches.
Oh my gosh.
2 catches, 30 yards, nothing though. So whatever. Jesse James is kind of a guy. He caught 5 of his 8 targets for 21 yards and a touchdown, but it's just so hard to know because Vance McDonald was the guy who scored the touchdown the week before. So meh. And Green Bay, by the way, again, has not allowed a touchdown to an opposing tight end all season. I would start their defense for sure, and I would start their kicker.
It was almost like Roethlisberger kept throwing it to Bryant to prove a point.
It felt that way to me too. I was
Didn't
like,
it feel that way to you?
Painful to watch at one point. I was just like, oh, stop it.
It was really uncomfortable.
They're a weird team with the drama. Yeah,
the whole team.
This week there wasn't much drama though for the Steelers, which was a nice change.
Yeah. All right, we got the Houston Texans, the Baltimore Ravens, another game of the week, Monday Night Football. All right, the Texans. I know this is an extremely tough matchup for Hopkins, but you are not benching him. He has had 8 touchdowns in the last 7 games with almost 500 yards in the last 4 games. Hello. Keep starting him. Lamar Miller has been doing just enough to stay in your lineup. This game won't be easy for Miller, but you may not have another option. I'm sure this will be plenty of questions around Miller this week. I'm sure if it's going to be like, should I start this person or Miller? And I understand that. I will try to prepare myself for your questions because I own Miller in 3 of my leagues as well. And so I am very, do I do it? Do I not? At this moment, I have yet to commit it either way. But I think he's going to do just enough to be okay. Not hurt your team, but not like really, really help your team either. D'Onta Foreman was placed on IR after a huge game last week and tearing his Achilles. The Texans picked up Andre Ellington off of waivers because he's available. He is the new backup for Miller. The Houston defense is in limbo, sleeper category, and you're not starting their kicker. Obviously, you're not starting Tom Savage either. I didn't feel like I had to say that, or CJ Fedorowicz. You're not starting him either. Good thoughts, but not really. All right, the Ravens, Ashley.
My only must start is the defense. And you can certainly play them, even though I think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be just fine. You can still play the defense. They'll be able to get some points. Sleepers. I know that Courtney likes them, but I just can't tell you to start any of the Ravens with any sort of certainty. Jerry Maclin caught 4 or 5 passes, but it was for only 35 yards. And it was targeted less than both Alex Collins and Danny Woodhead. He was targeted literally less than the running backs on this team. So now Mike Wallace was the receiver that came out on top this week. Maclin did a great job last week, but this week was Wallace. And he caught, again, 4 passes, but for 56 yards and a touchdown. And he's pretty much touchdown dependent at this point. The good news is that he has scored in back-to-back weeks. So The start should tilt slightly towards Wallace over Macklin out of the two, but the matchup is very favorable this week, so they both could perform. So I will put them in that sleeper category. It is at your own risk. But what I will say is that Watson also has a nice matchup. So, if Flacco really gets crazy here, there's a chance that he could score a touchdown because Watson is solely touchdown dependent, but he's been able to score this year. So there's a chance there.
If Flacco gets crazy,
Gets crazy and decides to throw
Crazy
over,
person. He does.
Wow.
he decides to throw over 200
Could you
yards.
imagine having Flacco at a party? Like,
By crazy, I mean that he decides to throw over 200 yards. That's what I mean.
I know, right? Wow.
Which would be crazy.
He's like the guy that stays in the
Flacco.
kitchen that constantly fills in the missing holes of the hors d'oeuvres.
And doesn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he stays there
Flacco.
so he looks like he's social, but really he has a purpose in mind, and it's just that.
But every party needs a
Fill it.
salsa filler. And that's what he does. He
That
tells
person
Flacco.
might be my husband.
That's okay.
No, he's the salsa eater.
He's the eater, though. No, he's
Yeah.
not. He's not filling
Yeah.
it. He's just eating.
He's the reason why somebody has to stay in the kitchen to keep refilling.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
Which is
right.
totally
And I
fine.
knew he worked in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, he's other side of the
Other
side of the offense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So we'll get back to the Ravens versus our salsa fillers. But Alex Collins, he had 20 carries, but only for 49 yards and a touchdown. So at least he salvaged it there with a touchdown and 4 catches for 22 yards. Danny Woodhead got involved in the passing game as expected, catching 5 of 6 targets for 21 yards, which is not a whole lot, but he only rushed 1 time. So Buck Allen is the player who lost his touches. This is what we weren't sure about where this was going to fall because Buck Allen can kind of lean both ways between Collins and Woodhead in terms of the role he can fill. But Buck Allen, only having 4 touches last game with the return of Woodhead. So I think we can expect to see this ratio this week as well, that it'll be more of a Collins Woodhead game versus Buck Allen. So you got to get him out of your lineup. So again, all of them can be flexes. They can be your guess between Collins and Wallace. They probably have the most upside here, but you can throw them all in a flex and just hope for, again, that Flacco decides to top the salsa.
All right, Brandon, you have an update?
Yes, our wonderful listeners here on YouTube Live told me, which I did not realize because I did not Google this drama. I need to Google drama more often. But actually, the video of poor Aaron Jones was released when he was arrested.
Yeah.
And did you see it?
I didn't see it because it was right before we started our show. I didn't want to turn the volume on.
So I'm on TMZ Sports here. I haven't watched it, but it looks sad to me. And I guess he was initially pulled over at noon on October 1st, going 79 miles per hour in a 55 when the officer smelled a strong odor and asked, "You going to be straight with me or not going to be straight with me? Weed?" And Jones replied, "I was smoking it." "Yeah, there you go. I appreciate the honesty," the cop said. And then Jones was asked to do a sobriety test, which I guess he bombed, which you can see in the video. And then he was cuffed and taken to the hospital for blood work, charged for speeding and whatnot. So I guess you can see the video. I just feel bad for these guys. Like, now they're on a website. Yeah, I feel bad. But smoking weed with breakfast is, I mean, that's what he said. He admitted to toking up before breakfast earlier that day. That's
it's a way to start your day.
Wake and
I
bake.
go for
Wake and bake. That's
Wake and
how
bake's
you
the
do it. Wake and bake.
Is that a phrase? Wake and
yes,
bake?
wake and bake.
Yeah.
Really? I usually go for green tea.
No.
I'm coffee.
Coffee. Well,
Or there's weed. That's
to
what I'm
each
learning.
their own.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm sorry,
So
Aaron
usually
Jones. What a bummer.
Sorry, not sorry for going over 20 miles an hour in the middle of the day, the speed limit. That's dangerous.
That's the part that
reckless
comes
driving.
through. Corny doesn't speed. Corny's the one of those good citizens that literally goes the speed limit.
I don't care if he smoked 4 hours before he got in a vehicle. I care that he's driving recklessly and could run into somebody and hurt somebody or hit somebody that's walking across the road. I don't know. I haven't seen the video. I don't know what kind of road he was driving on, but come on. You're a professional. Let's get it.
I hope he learned from this incident and it doesn't happen again. How's that?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. There you go. All right, you guys. Well, that is our week 12 roundup. Make sure you can listen to the top of the show before you put in your lineup to start off your wonderful Thanksgiving Day Yay, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hopefully you all have a great time. Hopefully there's a little bit of family drama that's just enjoyable, not terrible. And don't forget, you can listen to us again this week on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 9 to 11 Eastern on Saturday night. And you can chat with us on Twitter at HerFantasyFB. Until next time, guys, no more faking it.